My name is Joanna Claire Whitfield. I am 41 years old. And I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I have had the same best friend since I was 23 years old. 14 years. We met on the first day of a job we both started on the same Monday morning at a marketing firm in Austin, Texas. She was wearing a yellow blazer and carrying a coffee that was too big for her hands, and she looked at me across the elevator and said, "First day?" I said, "That obvious?" She laughed. And that was it. 14 years of that laugh. Her name was Cassie. Cassie Lynn Durwood. 3 years ago, Cassie took my job. Took my husband. Took the house I had spent 7 years paying for. I left with $31 in my checking account and one suitcase and a dog named Walter who was 11 years old and arthritic and the only living thing in my life at that moment who had not betrayed me. I cried for 3 days straight. Then I made one decision. And 3 years later, Cassie knocked on my front door. Alone. No job. No husband. Nothing left. And I said 2 words. But I will get to that. First, you need to understand what kind of friendship this really was. And what I missed for 14 years because I was too busy trusting someone to look clearly at what she was actually doing. I grew up in a small town called Buda, Texas. 15 miles south of Austin. Population 17,000. The kind of place where the Friday night lights are not a metaphor, they are literally the only thing happening on a Friday night. My father owned a hardware store on Main Street for 31 years. My mother taught piano lessons in our living room every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. I grew up hearing scales through the walls. I was not popular in high school. Not unpopular either. I was the kind of girl who was good at school and invisible at parties and spent most of her time in the school library reading books about places she planned to visit someday. I got a scholarship to UT Austin. Communications degree. Graduated in 2005 with $18,000 in student loans and a job offer from a mid-sized marketing firm called Hartwell Creative on Congress Avenue. I showed up on my first day in a navy blazer I had bought at Target the weekend before. Cassie was in the elevator in her yellow blazer with her 2 big coffee. And for 14 years I believed that elevator was one of the luckiest moments of my life. I want to tell you about one specific Sunday before everything fell apart. Because this is the memory that still comes back to me at the strangest moments. It was March. 2 years before she took everything. Cassie and I were sitting on my back porch on Lavender Creek Drive in Austin. It was one of those Texas evenings where the air finally cools down around 7 and everything smells like cedar and cut grass. We had a bottle of Whispering Angel Rose between us and takeout tacos from Juan and a Million on East Cesar Chavez. She looked at me and said, "Joe, I want you to know something. You are the most genuinely good person I have ever met in my life." And I mean that. I remember thinking this is what a real friendship feels like. I remember thinking I was lucky. I was not lucky. I was being studied. 'Cause what I did not know sitting on that porch with my rose and my tacos and my genuine good person best friend was that Cassie had been inside my email for 6 weeks. She had my password because I had given it to her 2 years earlier when I had my appendix out and needed her to check something for me. I had never changed it. For 6 weeks she had been reading my work emails, my performance reviews, my client correspondence, proposal I had spent 4 months building for our biggest account, a regional healthcare network worth $2.3 million annually to Hartwell Creative. She had been reading everything. And she had been taking notes. I found out about the emails on a Wednesday morning in April. Not from Cassie. From my boss. His name was Dennis Hartwell. Founder of Hartwell Creative. 62 years old. Silver hair, reading glasses on his desk that he never actually wore, a corner office on the 4th floor with a view of Congress Avenue that he had earned over 30 years of building something real. Called me in at 9:15 a.m. I sat across from his desk thinking, quarterly review. New project. Routine. He folded his hands. He said, "Joanna, I need to ask you something directly and I need you to be honest with me." I said, "Of course." He said, "The Riverside Healthcare proposal. The one you've been developing for 4 months. Did you share that work with anyone outside this office?" I said no. Absolutely not. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Joanna, I received a proposal yesterday from another agency. Meridian Group out of Dallas. It was submitted directly to Riverside Healthcare's board. I reviewed it this morning. He slid a document across his desk. I picked it up. I read the first page, then the second. Then I stopped, because on page 3 was a client segmentation framework I had built from scratch over 6 weeks. My methodology, my language, my specific breakdown of Riverside's patient demographics by region and age group. Word for word. I looked up at Dennis. He said, "Joanna, I don't think you did this, but I need to understand how it happened." I said, "Dennis, who submitted this proposal? Who at Meridian Group?" He turned the document over. On the back page was the submitting consultant's name. Cassie Lynn Durwood, independent consultant, formerly of Hartwell Creative. Formerly. I said, "When did Cassie leave Hartwell?" Dennis said, "She resigned 3 weeks ago." I assumed you knew. I had not known. My best friend of 14 years had resigned from our shared workplace 3 weeks ago and had not told me. I sat in Dennis Hartwell's office for a moment just looking at that name on the back page. Cassie Lynn Durwood. The yellow blazer. The too big coffee. The back porch in March with the rose and the tacos, and you are the most genuinely good person I have ever met. I said, "Dennis, she had access to my email. I gave her my password 2 years ago. I never changed it." He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them and said, "Joanna, I need to involve legal." I said, "I know." I drove home from that meeting on autopilot. Congress Avenue to South First to Lavender Creek Drive. I parked in my driveway. I sat in my car. I thought about the password. How I had texted it to her on a Tuesday evening 2 years ago. How she had said, "You sure? I don't want to snoop." How I had laughed and said, "Cass, you are literally the only person in the world I would trust with this. The only person in the world." I went inside. Marcus was in the kitchen. My husband, Marcus Whitfield. 39 years old. High school history teacher at Bowie High School on Slaughter Lane. A man I had been married to for 9 years. He was standing at the counter making a sandwich, and he looked up when I walked in and something crossed his face. Something fast. Gone in a second. But I saw it. I had been married to this man for 9 years. I knew every expression his face could make. That one was guilt. I said, "Marcus, how long have you known Cassie was going to do this?" He set down the bread. He said, "Joe," I said, "How long?" He looked at the counter. He said, "She told me 4 months ago. When she started building the proposal. 4 months ago. The same week Cassie had started reading my emails." I stood in my kitchen on Lavender Creek Drive and I looked at my husband of 9 years, and I understood something in that moment that I had not let myself understand before. This had not been Cassie acting alone. This had been Cassie and Marcus. Together. For at least 4 months. Probably longer. I said, "Marcus, are you in a relationship with her?" He did not answer. Which was its own answer. I walked to the kitchen drawer. The one next to the stove. I took out Walter's leash. Walter was in his dog bed in the corner, 11 years old, arthritic, looking at me with his old brown eyes. I clipped the leash to his collar. I picked up my purse. I walked to the front door. Marcus said, "Joanna, wait. Let me explain." I said, "Marcus, I watched your face when I walked in. You have been explaining to yourself for 4 months. You do not get to explain to me now." I walked out. Walter walked beside me down the driveway onto Lavender Creek Drive. His nails clicked on the pavement. He was slow. He always was. But he stayed right beside me the whole way. We walked for 47 minutes. When I came back, Marcus's truck was gone. I went inside. I sat on the kitchen floor with Walter in my lap. He was too big for my lap. He had always been too big for my lap. Climbed in anyway. I sat there for a long time. Then I picked up my phone. I had 2 calls to make. The first was to a lawyer. The second was to my mother in Buda, Texas. My mother answered on the first ring. I said, "Mama, I need to come home for a few days." She said, "I will make up your room right now." "You want me to make chicken and dumplings?" I said, "Yes, please." She said, "Drive safe, baby. Walter can sleep in your room." I hung up. I looked around my kitchen. The house on Lavender Creek Drive that I had spent 7 years paying for. Kitchen where I had made coffee every morning for 9 years. The drawer next to the stove with Walter's leash still in my hand. I had $31 in my checking account because payday was 4 days away. I had one suitcase. I had Walter. And I had my mother's chicken and dumplings waiting for me 15 miles south on I-35. I packed in 23 minutes. I did not take much. Clothes. My laptop. The framed photo from my desk at Hartwell Creative, my team at the company Christmas party 2 years ago, all of us laughing, arms around each other. And one more thing. From the kitchen drawer next to the stove. A small yellow notepad. Kind with the sticky back. I had bought a pack of 12 at Target 3 years ago and had been using them ever since for grocery lists and reminders and the occasional note to Marcus that I would stick to the coffee maker in the morning. I took the whole pack. I did not know why exactly. I just knew I was not leaving it. I loaded Walter into the back seat. I backed out of the driveway on Lavender Creek Drive. And I drove south toward Buda, Texas, toward my mother's chicken and dumplings and the piano scales I had grown up hearing through the walls. My mother's house on Elm Creek Road in Buda smelled like pine sol and something baking. It always had. I pulled into the driveway at 6:47 p.m. The porch light was on. My mother was at the door before I even turned off the engine. 64 years old, silver hair she had stopped fighting 10 years ago, wearing the blue apron she had owned since before I was born. She looked at me when I got out of the car. She did not say anything. She just opened her arms. I walked into them. Walter pushed past both of us into the house because he knew exactly where the good smells were coming from. My mother held me for a long time on that porch. Then she said, "Come inside. The dumplings are ready." We sat at her kitchen table. The same table I had done homework at for 12 years. She put a bowl in front of me and sat across from me with her own cup of coffee, and she did not ask me a single question. She just let me eat. And I want to tell you something about that moment because it is the kind of thing that is easy to miss when you are in the middle of it. When everything falls apart, the marriage, the job, the house, the friendship you thought was the realest thing in your life, what saves you is not a plan. What saves you is a bowl of chicken and dumplings at your mother's kitchen table at 6:47 p.m. while she drinks her coffee and does not ask you a single question. That is what saves you. I stayed in Buda for 11 days. On day 3 I called Dennis Hartwell. He had retained Hartwell's legal team. They were pursuing Cassie for trade secret theft and breach of the confidentiality agreement she had signed when she joined the firm. He said, "Joanna, I want you to know this is not your fault. And I want you to come back." I said, "Dennis, I need 2 more weeks." He said, "Take 3. On day 5 I met with a divorce attorney in Austin. A woman named Patricia Cole. Office on 6th Street. She was 58, direct, no drama. She said, "Joanna, Texas is a community property state. 9 years of marriage. The house on Lavender Creek Drive, the retirement accounts, the assets, we split everything down the middle." I said, "What about the fact that he was involved with my best friend for 4 months while I was living in that house?" Tricia said, "It does not affect the asset split in Texas. But it tells me everything I need to know about how hard I am going to fight for you." I liked her immediately. On day 8 Walter had a bad morning. His arthritis was worse in my mother's house because of the cold tile floors. He could not get up from his bed without help. I sat on the floor beside him for 40 minutes rubbing his back while my mother made his food softer in the microwave. My mother sat beside me on the floor. She said, "Joe, what are you going to do?" "Not today. After." I looked at Walter. I said, "I have been building other people's strategies for 14 years, Mama. Client strategies. Campaign strategies. Hartwell's strategies. Cassie used my strategy to try to take my biggest account." My mother said, "So?" I said, "So maybe it is time I built something for myself." My mother nodded. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. That evening I sat at her kitchen table with the yellow notepad I had taken from the drawer on Lavender Creek Drive. I opened it to the first page. I wrote 2 words at the top. Whitfield Creative. Then I opened my laptop. and I started building. I worked every evening for the next 6 days at that kitchen table while my mother read in the living room and Walter slept on my feet. By the time I drove back to Austin, I had a business plan, a client acquisition strategy, a rate structure, a LinkedIn profile updated and ready, and one email drafted and ready to send. To Riverside Healthcare, the client Cassie had tried to steal from me. I knew their needs better than anyone. I had spent 4 months building a proposal for them. Proposal Cassie had stolen was the first version, the rough draft. What I built at my mother's kitchen table in Buda, Texas over 6 evenings was the real version, the one I had never shown anyone. I sent the email on a Tuesday morning at 8:03 a.m. from a coffee shop on Congress Avenue in Austin. The subject line said, "My name is Joanna Whitfield. We have not met formally, but I built the proposal you received last month. I would like to show you what I did not include in it." I ordered a second coffee. I opened the yellow notepad to a fresh page, and I waited. The reply came at 9:47 a.m. Riverside Healthcare's VP of Marketing, a woman named Carol Drummond. She said, "Ms. Whitfield, we have been hoping you would reach out. When can you come in?" I looked at that email for a long moment. Then I wrote one word on the yellow notepad. Thursday. I circled it. And for the first time since I had walked out of Dennis Hartwell's office with Cassie's name on the back page of a stolen proposal, I smiled. A real one. Kind that starts somewhere deep and works its way out. The meeting with Carol Drummond was on a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Riverside Healthcare's offices were on Research Boulevard in Austin. 12th floor. A conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city I had spent 16 years building a career in. I wore the navy blazer I had bought at Target the week before my first day at Hartwell Creative. 14 years old. Still fit perfectly. I carried one thing. The yellow notepad. Carol Drummond was 51 years old. Practical handshake. No small talk. The kind of woman who had spent 20 years in healthcare administration and had very little patience for anything that wasted her time. I respected that immediately. She said, "Ms. Whitfield, I want to be straightforward with you. We received the Meridian proposal. We reviewed it. And our team flagged something." I said, "What did they flag?" She said, "The segmentation framework on page 3. One of our analysts had seen similar methodology before, in a Hartwell Creative presentation from 18 months ago. We reached out to Hartwell. They confirmed the work was originally yours." She folded her hands. She said, "We do not work with people who steal. So Meridian is out. And you are here." I opened the yellow notepad. I said, "Carol, what I sent Meridian was a first draft. A rough framework. What I have been building since then is different." I talked for 41 minutes. When I finished, Carol looked at the notepad, at the pages I had filled at my mother's kitchen table in Buda over 6 evenings. She said, "When can you start?" I said, "Monday." She nodded. She said, "Ms. Whitfield, one more thing. The Meridian consultant, Cassie Durwood. Do you know her personally?" I said I did. For 14 years. Carol looked at me for a moment. She said, "I am sorry." I said, "So am I." Whitfield Creative launched officially on May 1st. Riverside Healthcare was my first client. Contract value $1.8 million annually. Slightly less than what Cassie had tried to steal. But it was mine. Every dollar of it. Built on my yellow notepad at my mother's kitchen table. By September I had 3 more clients. A regional hospital network. A wellness company on the east side. A healthcare staffing firm that had found me through Carol Drummond's recommendation. By the end of the first year, Whitfield Creative had 6 clients and annual revenue of $2.1 million. I hired my first employee in October. A young woman named Priya who was 26 and reminded me of myself at that age. Sharp, quiet, working twice as hard as anyone noticed. On her first day, I left a yellow sticky note on her desk. Said, "You are going to be great at this." She kept it on her monitor for the rest of the year. I know because I checked. Now let me tell you what happened to Cassie. Hartwell Creative's legal team filed suit in June. Trade secret theft. breach of confidentiality agreement, tortious interference with business relationships. Cassie's independent consultancy, the one she had built on my stolen proposal, lasted 8 months. Riverside Healthcare had already pulled away before she even got started. 3 other firms she had approached found out about the lawsuit and declined. The legal fees alone were enough to close her doors by December. Marcus filed for divorce in July, citing irreconcilable differences. I signed the papers in August. The house on Lavender Creek Drive sold in September. After 9 years and 7 months of mortgage payments, my half of the equity was $94,000. I put it into Whitfield Creative. Marcus moved into an apartment on the east side of Austin. Cassie moved in with him in October. I know because mutual friends told me. I felt nothing when I heard that except a kind of quiet mathematical satisfaction. 2 people who had made the same choices had found their way to each other. That seemed right. That seemed like the correct outcome of a very long equation. 3 years after I walked out of my house on Lavender Creek Drive with $31 and 1 suitcase in Walter, Cassie knocked on my door. I had moved by then. A house on South Congress Avenue. Smaller than Lavender Creek. Better bones. Kitchen with good light and a drawer next to the stove where I kept my yellow notepads. It was a Saturday morning in April. I was making coffee. Walter was in his bed by the back door, 13 years old now, slower than ever, still the most loyal living thing I had ever known. The knock came at 9:22 a.m. I opened the door. Cassie was standing on my porch. She looked different. Not older exactly. Just smaller. The yellow blazer confidence was gone. She was wearing jeans and a gray sweater, and she had the look of someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. She said, "Joe, I need to talk to you." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about the elevator in 2007. The yellow blazer. The too big coffee. 14 years of that laugh. I thought about the back porch in March. The rose and the tacos. You are the most genuinely good person I have ever met. I thought about my mother's kitchen table. Chicken and dumplings. The yellow notepad. Walter on my feet. I said, "Cassie, what do you need?" She said, "Marcus left 3 months ago. He found someone else. The lawsuit took everything I had saved. I have been freelancing, but nobody will hire me because of the trade secret case. She stopped. She looked at the porch floor. She said, "I just needed to see you. I don't know why. I just needed to see you." I stood in my doorway for a long moment. Walter appeared behind me. He sniffed the air. He looked at Cassie with his old brown eyes. Then he turned around and went back to his bed. Even Walter had made his decision. I looked at Cassie one more time. Then I said the 2 words. I said, "I'm sorry." Not for her. Not as an apology for anything I had done. I said it the way you say it when you see someone standing on your porch who used to be your best friend and is now a stranger who made choices you will never fully understand and is living with the weight of them. I said it because it was true. I was sorry. Sorry that she had been the kind of person who could do what she did. Sorry that 14 years had ended the way they had. Sorry for whatever had happened inside her that made stealing from the most genuinely good person she knew feel like the right decision. Then I said, "Cassie, I cannot help you. But I hope you find your way." And I closed the door. I went back to my kitchen. I poured my coffee. I sat at my table with my yellow notepad and my coffee and the sound of Walter breathing slowly in his bed by the back door. And I felt something I want to name correctly because I think it matters. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just completion. Like a sentence that had finally found its period. Walter passed away on a Tuesday morning in November. He was 13 years old and 4 months. He went quietly in his bed by the back door in the kitchen on South Congress Avenue with his head in my lap and my hand on his back and the morning light coming through the window the way it always did at that hour. I sat with him for a long time after. Then I called my mother. She answered on the first ring the way she always did. I said, "Mama, Walter's gone." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Oh, baby. He was a good dog." I said, "He was the best dog." She said, "You want me to come up?" I said, "No. I'm okay." I just needed to hear your voice. She said, I love you, Joe. You call me tonight. I hung up. I sat on the kitchen floor where Walter's bed was. The same floor I had sat on in Lavender Creek Drive 3 years earlier with Walter in my lap, too big for my lap climbing in anyway. I thought about everything that had happened between that kitchen floor and this one. The $31 in my checking account. The one suitcase. The 11 days in Buddha. The yellow notepad. Carol Drummond's conference room on the 12th floor. Priya's sticky note on her monitor. The $94,000 from the house on Lavender Creek Drive going into Whitfield Creative. And Cassie on my porch in April in her gray sweater looking smaller than I had ever seen her. I thought about the 2 words I had said. I'm sorry. People have asked me since, friends, my mother, even my therapist Dr. Angela Moore, whose office was on Lamar Boulevard and who I had been seeing every other Thursday for 2 years, people have asked me why I said that. Why I said I'm sorry to someone who had taken everything from me. And the honest answer is this. I said it because I had spent 3 years building something real. Something mine. Something that no one could access with a stolen password or copy with a stolen proposal or dismantle with a forged signature or a betrayed trust. I had built Whitfield Creative from a yellow notepad at my mother's kitchen table with $31 in my checking account and an arthritic dog on my feet. And when Cassie stood on my porch in April looking smaller than the world, I realized something. She had not taken anything from me that I had not rebuilt better. She had not taken my ability to work. She had not taken my mother's kitchen table or the chicken and dumplings or the porch light that was always on when I pulled into the driveway. She had not taken Priya, who put sticky notes on her monitor. She had not taken Carol Drummond's handshake or the 12th-floor conference room or the $2.1 million first year. She had not taken Walter. He was with me until the very last morning. So when I looked at her on that porch, the only thing I genuinely felt was sorry. Sorry that she had traded all of that, 14 years of something real, for a stolen proposal and an 8-month consultancy and a man who left her for someone else 3 years later. That was not a trade I would have made. That was not a trade anyone should make. Whitfield Creative today has 14 employees. Office on 5th Street in Austin. Annual revenue just under $3.4 million. Riverside Healthcare just renewed for their 4th consecutive year. Carol Drummond sent me a bottle of Whispering Angel Rose last Christmas with a note that said, Joanna, here's to 4 years of the real thing. I laughed when I read that. Then I called my mother and read her the note. She laughed too. That laugh. The one that comes from somewhere real. The one that has nothing to do with stolen proposals or gray sweaters on porches or $31 in a checking account. Just 2 women on the phone on a December evening laughing about Rose and 4 years of building something that belongs entirely to you. That is what I want you to take from this story. Not the lawsuit. Not the equity split. Not the 2 words on the porch. This. The yellow notepad is still in my kitchen drawer next to the stove. Same pack I took from Lavender Creek Drive 3 years ago. 6 pads left out of 12. Every time I start something new, a new client, a new strategy, a new idea, I open a fresh page. 'Cause everything I have built started on one of those pages. At my mother's kitchen table. With $31 and a dog on my feet and chicken and dumplings going cold in a bowl. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. I did not do it for revenge. I did it because of who I am. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what time is it where you are tonight? And tell me, has someone ever taken something from you that ended up leading you somewhere better than where you started? 'Cause I believe that happens more than people talk about. And I want to read every single one of those stories. If this moved you, if you felt that kitchen floor or that porch light or that yellow notepad, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Honor Unveiled. We will see you in the next one.